Well, good afternoon, and well, thanks, Paul, for this introduction. Yes, as I mentioned, I was creating the Italian pavilion, try to explain that Italy is not about a metropolis, it's not about a big city, but it's about thousands of small cities. And maybe we talk about the green city, and maybe if you're connecting small city, they are distance 20 minutes, 30 minutes from each other. And between cities is landscape, agricultural parks, and many other things. You can imagine this network of city is maybe the city of Italy, you know. So I want to show you something about why we are so engaged on sustainability. You know, I think we're using this word too much, we talk too much, but maybe we still need to see what are the results of in architecture. So first of all, make building is not an ecological action, so because make building is using nature's material. But I want just to show you this roadmap to see what will be the direction of the next years, starting from Kyoto protocols and see now it's COP25 in Madrid these days, and the engagement of many countries and many states about how we can reduce the CO2 emission. But one of the key points is, is how we're going to do in the next 20 years. You know? We all talk about in Europe about zero energy buildings or how we can reduce CO2 emissions. But these simple numbers are showing the architects, they have a very great responsibility in the next 30 years, because we built almost 160 billion square meters. This is the concrete around the planet. But we're going to build another 20 billions in the next 6 years, and the Chinese 1 billion every year. So all this is mean transforming materials in buildings, which is one of the big tasks for the future, how we can design better building in relation to these numbers. And one thing we are working now is, it is not only about the emission of the building during its life. If you take 70 years life of a building, if you see that graph, almost half of the CO2 emission is during the production of the building, is what is inside of material. So we are very focused on the second part, like the running buildings, CO2 emission during the running, which is the performance. I think we need to start to work also on the other side, how we can producing material with less CO2 emission, more efficiency. So I think we have a task to do more in the next future, how to do that. And what the paradox, I think we're facing a very strange situation. This graph showing that ambitions also by the government to reduce CO2 emission to zero in the next, is a roadmap 2030, 2050, and at the same time we grow up about 230 billion square meters. So how are we going to compensate in this paradox, reducing the CO2 and increase the number of square meters of buildings? So I like to arise this because we really face a big change, especially when we talk about nearly zero energy building, which is the regulation in Europe from next year, and how architects, engineers are dealing with this challenge, because we're coming from 200 years of culture of technology, not zero emission. So that's where we're going to find the knowledge. So what I'm saying is modernity in the last 200 years has cut the bridge with our past. I mean, I'm not nostalgic, but we did for centuries building with no energy. The famous zero energy building are in our past. So now in the future we talk again how to make zero energy buildings. And so maybe what we talk sustainability is to rebuild the bridge with our history and to see how we was able to do that for centuries, and maybe in that story we find our knowledge. So it's time to find a new relationship with the client. But the point, I say the European regulation about this is all the effort is made to try to live better in our city. That's the goal. It's not only performance, it's how we can make our cities better life. So that's the point. But I'm saying we did that for centuries, and I like to bring you back a little bit in our history, because sometimes we forgot how much information we have behind us, So this is a little map about many buildings. I make choice of few. You can imagine a trip on the past from Europe to China. And if I'm starting from here, I just give you a little example. This is in Henan province where the Chinese building this amazing master plan. Is a city excavating with this kind of a courtyard, and they live in with rooms underground, and using this courtyard as a ventilation system and also daylighting, which actually design amazing landscape because nothing is up, it's only underground and trees and garden. I think this is a very interesting example, which is the same in Tunisia, in North Africa. And I'm sure you remember that picture in Star Wars, when the Skywalker home. Skywalker home is this one, which actually is in Tunisia. It houses in Tunisia. So I think Lucas, when they write this, said a long time ago in a galaxy far away, and he talked from the future, so looking back and looking this vernacular architecture. So I think that was an interesting connection about maybe we need to understand better how these things works. Or the step well in India, Ahmedabad in the Rajasthan, It's very hot climate, so what do people do? In Italy, we build piazza, piazza squares for meeting. In India, they build this building underground, step down, every 10 meters they lost 1 degree. So when they arrive in the end, this becomes really a social place, a social palace, And in the end, is a well with water, and then evaporating waters is a drop temperature. So still today in India, in Ahmedabad, in many regions, you can find a lot of people in the summertime spending their time socializing this place. But I think the most interesting story is about Marco Polo. Everybody knows the millions, the trip he made the journey made from Venice to China. So one of the things he writes in his book, a very, very interesting story. He tells, if you write the book, said, I'm arriving in Persia in the middle of the desert, and the people in that village, in sign of welcoming, they give me an ice cream. So how Persian people was able to make an ice cream in 1273, It's a question we need an answer, And how they did. They built buildings, That is a section of the building. It's a big wall facing south. And from the top of the wall and the small wall behind, that's the angle of the sun in the wintertime. So it means that little pool is behind the wall is always under shade. So and then they excavate a big tank and built this dome. So what's happened? So in the winter time, they're putting water in this shallow pool, and by the effect of the sky, which is minus 55 degrees, by the effect of the radiation of the sky, the water was freezing. And every night, in the middle of the Persia, in the desert, they make ice, and then they stock the ice in the tank. And when this full of ice is frozen, and in the summertime, when it's too hot, the dome is protect the ice by ventilated. And so the Persian people, we know any technology, anything, they was able to eat an ice cream in the middle of the desert. So what does it mean? We don't need to do that again, because we can do ice much faster. But that's people was thinking about the complicity, empathy with climate. We completely forgot this relationship because we build buildings with no relation with climate at all. Because too many years of technology, this is one of the few who remain after all the war in that area, For too many centuries, we forgot this relation with climate. So architects completely forgot the knowledge. Engineers try to solving architects' problems, but together it doesn't work. And especially the environment present a bill, and the bill is an increasing of pollution everywhere. Buildings are 45%, 50% of CO2 emissions. So architects are really, really important professionals to solving that problem. So, or Pakistani, just this catch window, no? They catch wind in the night, bringing air inside of mud buildings, cool down the buildings, because temperature curve is take 8 hours. During the sunny day in the middle of the desert, Persian people, they're living inside a house with maybe 7, 8 degrees less than outside, which is huge in terms of energy, you know? Only by the shape. So what I'm interested in to develop in the next futures is using technology because we need it, but maybe building, solving problem by the shape, the material. So architecture is the solution, not the technology. So there's a many examples around the world, but maybe this, what we call high architectural quality, is this complicity with the climate, no? Climate relationship. And sometimes we forgot some very, very simple things. You know, we make our building very complicated or complex, which is interesting, but maybe in some place, maybe we can think about natural ventilation, how we can ventilate our buildings, or how we can improve in the solar radiation, reducing the demand of energy, or like these are projects we did in the last years, or solar radiation and greenery, you know, how these two things combining together, no? Or shading, this is a building in Accra, in Ghana, no? You know, that building is very simple, you know? The sun in the tropical area is go fast up, no, sunset, and it's very short, you know, the sun is always up and then go down very quickly, you know? So if you undershade, what is hot is the sun, not the air. So if you're under the shade, you can reduce the demand of cooling. So that building, that's why these cantilever floors, protecting the glass, reduce the demand of energy, and this building in Ghana, electricity is the same price of London, because they do with the oil, so the same price. But you can reduce more than 50% by using a design before technology, no? Or optimizing daylighting. No? So what we call green architecture maybe is a balance of hybrid. You know? Maybe we can combining this idea of climate relationship and at the same time reducing the demand of technology. How we can do a little bit like the electrical car, now sometimes hybrid. You know? We don't go full electric, we don't want to be all gasoline, so maybe it's in the middle. No? And where are we going to get these informations? No? So I think from the past, of course, we can learn how building was made, how the people thinking about this relationship. And I think another one is by the plants. Plants living in the planet for 5 million years. Homo sapiens, 300,000 years. So the gap of adapting to climate is huge. And plant, like building, they cannot move. So in the last 5 million years, plant was obliged to stay in the same place and dealing with climate. No? Climate change, the plant adapting themselves. So if you look at that, it maybe looks a little bit simple to say, but if you look in that, it is a book from Stefano Mancuso, he's a professor in Florence, he tells a story about the intelligence of plants. Plants, they don't have a brain, but they are intelligence, which has already put a question how they do that. But transforming CO2 in oxygen by leaves, producing humidity, shading, and the roots, they do amazing work. It's not only a structure, they're going to look for materials, for energy, for source. No? So if you look at our buildings, you know, still not so intelligent, you know, because we're still thinking is a building, almost they are not, they are built against the climate. Sometimes they have a machine on the head, like us, no? It's a very anthropoform. No? We have a head. If you've broken your brain, your body doesn't work. It's the same in buildings. You've broken the machine, it doesn't going to work anymore. So maybe there's something we can do about material. No? Maybe buildings intelligence is not based in one thing, but you diffuse intelligence, like in plants. If you cut a tree, a branch, the tree doesn't die, because it's compensating. They know. So maybe our building is about more material, the innovation on DNA of material. There are some examples here, in which kind of concrete, which kind of ceramics, the glass. They all can do some work to make our building better without using energy. So I think we need to study our past, but also looking vegetable areas or plants to understand how they was able to adapt themselves. I'll give you some example later. So like we did a project in Sydney about make a building with a skin and completely small photovoltaics mosaic. And maybe photovoltaics become some decorative things, not only a machine putting on the building, which is terrible. These products are terrible. It's panels, black or blue, putting on top of a building is not really good. So maybe we can improving the massive of the building, reducing the transparency and increasing the skin as a part of the production of energy. So let's go very quickly. When we did the project in Morocco, I was inspired by this. So if you look at that plant, it's quite interesting. Cactus have a long, long history. But if you look at the shape of the cactus, not only the form shape, but the leaves. Leaves are the triangular. So that means that plant, during the sunny day, half of the leaves are under shade. So half of the plant is no get sun. I'm sure it takes maybe some century or some 1,000 years to do that. And the top of the plant is white because the skin becomes white because high reflecting the sun, because the sun is just in the top of the plants. And the spine are, of course, to defend themselves from animals to eat the plants. But if you look careful, this spine are sensor. They catch humidity in the air when temperature change. And condensation is stop a drop on this spine and the water going inside the plant. So you can imagine how long a plant to understand this relation with climate. So much they're able to live in a very, very nasty context, able to survive. So I think we have a lesson from that, And so we did a master plan, which this one is a residential for university. And because we cannot make a big landscape plan in Morocco, in the middle of the desert, there's not too much water to do. We did this kind of a unit, like a little oasis, and some main boulevard, we just with the greenery. And what are the concepts? How we can put together, how creativity come from some sustainable principle, How we can transform a building using some major point, humidity or temperature or the relation with climate. How all these things can be transformed in a design. Because that is the point, We see sometimes sustainable aspect like energy as a limitation, or maybe is a creative opportunity. If you take that and transform that in a design process. So that is the idea of the cactus. The residential is a circle, and the inside is a little hosey, which is filter all the waters, and this external skin is by terracotta leaves, which is producing shade at the same time keeping the cooling in the night. And the way they are together, Maybe when you build together, you're creating a condition, a different condition between them. So it's a microclimate change between these elements. And all we talk about the temperature, outside temperature, how we can mitigate in the public space, the public realm. So and that is a thermal picture about cactus during the day. You see how much is on shade? So we thought it was, just to show you how much is intelligence, And that is the boulevard inside of this campus. The big oasis, and water is a major issue. We talk about a lot about recycling water, but in this case, this unit is keeping their water inside the filters and using plant as a filter. Yeah, that's it. And I'm sure you know about this 70 development objective from United Nations. We cannot use it all, but maybe for that project we take some of this. So we had slowly in the process, we had some of the principle to take all our professionals close to the objective of reducing CO2 emissions and make a more sustainable world. So I think it's a lot of work to do, because it's the most difficult thing. It's not the climate change. It's coming in any case. It's how we can change our culture. That's the major problem. It's take a long time. So just to give another example, we did building this in Italy, in Ferrara. Is the Agency for Protection of the Environment. So based on the ventilation system. So we did these buildings, is one floor, and the roof is 120 chimney, looking south. And the chimney is working with the principle of, in the summertime, increasing ventilation, take away the heating from the office, open a little vent on the top. Of course, that's not enough. That's not enough to cool in the building, but it's a lot of work done by the shape of this chimney. And the summertime, using like a glass house, keeping the heating inside and circulating by the fan. Of course, that's not enough to heating all the building, but as you know, if you reduce the demand of cooling or heating, your machine are reducing in terms of size and thermal consumption. So that's, for me, is what we call form and performance. There are relationship between the two, no? And that's the building. It's an old wood construction and supposed to be quick. I'm sure you know Italy is the country of paradox, no? It's the most beautiful country in the world, most difficult to live. So we won that competition in 2008 and we finished last year. So instead to take 8 months to do, we take 10 years. That's the life of an architect in Italy. If you do one project every 10 years, after 3 projects, your career is finished. So you cannot do the Italian work only in Italy. You need to, that's why we work abroad now, because Italy is beautiful. It would be nice to work only there, but we cannot do that. So after 10 years site work, when we opened the building, need the first maintenance program. So it's okay. But all the work was based on daylighting, how we can bring lighting inside the office buildings and how we can improve the ventilation. Because if you talk with people who are working in buildings, office, forget for a second the architecture, but the 2 things they're looking for their life every day is the quality of the air and the quality of light. There's 2 fundamental elements of people looking for working. So we're using also very old technique, like this is artificial sky. You can do by different other program and digital faster, but it's interesting. Analyze the daylighting inside of our buildings. And if you do that and change some of the colors, also in the white spectrum, you can see how much the lux change and the quality of the light. So I think we need to really go deep on this, because if you make a choice of material, that can change the quality of light inside of your office building. That's the building in the end. So I want to finish. Paul, have another minute? Okay. This is my last project I did for school. We are very engaged on school projects in Italy. And all the stories started from the story of Pinocchio. I'm sure all of you know Pinocchio's story, which is a very sad and terrible story, Can you tell a kid, is in wood, and he's burned his legs, and then was kidnapped by a fox. So it's a terrible story. It's not funny, But at the moment was eaten by the whales, and he stayed inside of a whale for 2 years. So if you're reading that book, it's terrifying, you terrify kids. But the story is beautiful because it's very dramatic, but that picture is a Walt Disney picture. In the moment that Pinocchio lost in the whale for 2 years in the darkness, and then he saw in the end of this tunnel a little light, and he started to run. And then when they arrived close, he saw his father, Giuseppe, Geppetto, and this page of the book is really, really beautiful. It's very, very emotional. So for me, that was also the wound on a mother. It's a sort of a place to protect yourself. And that is the story of this kindergarten. And one thing I would suggest you to think yourself too, how many of you remember your kindergarten from 0 to 3? I did that project, and in my mind, it come back my kindergarten. I said, why I remember my I was 3, and you almost don't remember anything, But that I discovered it 50 years later. I'm a little bit older than 53, but then I remember my kindergarten, and my kindergarten was a circle building with a very small wall. When you're 1 meter high, a big wall is carrying you. But if a wall is small, it's in your scale. And then there was only 2 little rooms with a lot of sun. And I still remember that day of sun. So why I remember that? And then I discovered 15 years later that was designed by a modernist architect called Giuseppe Vaccaro. Was one of the leading architects of modernism in Italy, and that's me. That's why I tell you that, because when you design a school, building doesn't move, but they're traveling in the memory. So you must be sure what you're doing, because when you do a school, then you give a memory to kids for all their life. That's why I was very concentrated on this, and it was a series of very simple elements, because in the plain of Italy, if you're traveling from Torino to Venice, the landscape is very simple. It's a flat land. There's only trees, and sometimes some tower from church. That's what you see. That's what your eyes is. Tum, 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 tum. So the buildings is made like this, because it's something that you have in your eyes. There's a repetition, but inside of the repetition is a sort of a whale, a place where you can imagine something else. But just to tell you the Italian paradox, we live in a very bureaucratic system. I'm sure all Europe like this. Italy doesn't make the difference. But you see that picture? So when we finish the building, for opening the building, you need an authorization for the public authority, And the guys came to visit the building. So, okay, well, this is a floor become a wall, or is a wall become a floor? They looking on the papers of rules and say, I can't find it. A wall can be a wall, can be a floor, and a floor can be. So it takes 3 months to convince them that there is no problem. No, it's not a problem. Don't worry, it's not a problem. And kids, of course, what they did the first day, that they could start to play with this floor become a wall. So that is the building on the night. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, that was a very lovely presentation, and I want to ask whether your kind of sensibility as an Italian design architect, but with a profound interest in environmental design also, do you see any conflict with this? Because I can think of some architects in some countries where actually, in a way, if you're doing environmental design, you have to kind of sort of prove it and make it look different, and somehow the idea of joy is removed. Can you comment on that?
Yes, it's difficult, but if I look back, I'm just come back to our history. That was the history of architecture. The relation between climate and performance is 1,000 years. Architects always dealing with this. It's only recently we lost this, and also, put together the issue, environmental issue and design and buildings. I mean, architects need to become a little bit more engineered. They need to know a little bit more about how performance building is. And engineers need to understand a little bit more architects. And for a long time, these two cultures was separating. One of the problems of specialization in architecture is divide the competence. For many centuries, there was no difference between architect and engineers, so they all built, and sometime in the past, they also built physically, no? They know everything about it. No? Then, of course, it was a necessary dividing competence because it's becoming very, very specific, but in a certain way, when we divide the competence, architects, they lost the knowledge how to do it. This relation with climate, the engineering, they make a huge effort to make architects building works. But I don't think there's no more time to do that. So architects, they really need to make an effort to make their design as a part of including in their design. Like, just to give an example, you know, fire problems in buildings are fully integrated, no? You know, there's no doubt, there's no discussion about that your buildings need to be fireproof and you need to work with it. So, and doesn't make any problem to your buildings. Well, okay, make a lot of problems, but you know, you're dealing with this because sometimes it's difficult. So why this thing, they don't go together all the time? So it's quite frustrating to see there was a long period of time in the last 20 years. Then I say bioarchitecture, green architecture is try to find the language to say, oh, I'm a green, no? Which I find that a little bit ridiculous because it's not something that needs to be specific. It's a part of the history and is a fundamental of buildings. It's not outside of that, which is it's not easy. That's my question.
I wonder what you think about the designs in Milan, the towers with the trees and the planting on them.
Okay.
I mean, do you find that aesthetically pleasing, or is it an example of wearing your heart on your sleeve?
No, I think I don't want to be too nasty in that, but I say there are two things. If you look at that building as a beautiful, I'm saying it's nice. It's nice. It's an icon, and no doubt. If you want to talk about sustainability, that's not true, because I tell you the story of the plants. If you put an intelligent thing inside of a stupid things, no, it doesn't come intelligent too. That's the point. No, it doesn't work like this. I'm saying plants working for just a little bit. The idea that we discuss about planting trees everywhere, which is good. It's like you not agree. I'm agree, of course, no. But thinking that the plant resolving the problem of cities, this is a novel. It's not true. This doesn't work. The Apple headquarters by Foster, no, in the United States. I mean, that is the most sophisticated and sustainable building. They spend a huge amount of money. So it is like the top of sustainabilities, which I believe that. They planting 8,000 trees in the courtyard. No? So the 8,000 trees in the courtyards cover 3% of CO2 emission. So that's the tree, that's the reality. It's nice, but we cannot tell the story that you plant tree in the buildings and the cities, solving the problem. Because we always think it to add something, not to take away something. That's the point of our way to think it. We always had things. But if you want to reduce CO2 emission in the cities, you need to take away something like traffic. Nobody wants to make policy about traffic. You need to take away something else. If you know numbers are numbers.
And do you think, or do you find in Italy that the planning of cities and thinking about cities is something where architects are having an influence on city planners? Is it the other way around, that city planners are demanding more from architects, the politicians are demanding more? I mean, where is the kind of impetus at a local level? We know where it is at a global level from the UN, but do you find in Italy, well, you've got I loved your story about how long it takes to get a building done. I mean, this is the architect, it's like slow cooking, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, slow food in the term is very slow, no? Because it's, well, the planning in Italy, I don't know, I think urban planning is fail. I don't know in many other countries, but in Italy, there are cities with a plan of planning in 1984. Still, they're using that plan. So it's completely out of date. And it was a very strong politics tools, because if you decide what to do in the city, of course you have a big power. No? Now all these ideas of climate change and reducing temperature in the city, all these fundamental elements in urban planning are completely not part of the policy, not yet. Milan is the only city to do that, because Milan in this moment is booming, and I think the mayor and the city group are very strong in this, and they're fighting really strongly, asking architects. But the rest of Italy, architects are not in the picture. No? We're not the last design of contemporary building in Italy is did in Maxi in Rome. Take 14 years to build. 14, and spend 3 times the budget. So what is what I'm saying, the paradox of Italy is the country, you go to Italy not only for eating a pizza, because you can eat pizza in many other places, but you go to Italy to see the city. That's why you go in Italy, to see the city, discovering hearts. It's our DNA. In the last 30, 40 years, we completely forgot. We are not doing any buildings. We don't do any interesting architecture. We don't do enough competition. So I think it is a critical moment, and it's really the moment the architects really need to, in some way, participate more in the politics, in good terms, to help the administration to facing this problem. Politics are not any idea about facing the major challenges of the future. I'm just referring to architects' declaration from RBA, which is good. Italian translate that in Italy and in Italian, and they promoting this. I think it's good, because better than nothing. But everybody believe really on that declaration? Everybody have enough tools to understand what does it mean, the responsibility to sign an agreement about climate change? So what are we going to do? So I think it's, my first interesting is how also architects, they can promoting cultures of sustainability through their work, but using institutions to help professionals, architect, engineer, to go in another era, which it takes time, but we need to do it.
I think it's a good note to end on. I just want to mention, for people who may not have picked this up, that if I've understood this correctly, what has happened here in the Netherlands is that as a result of legal challenges to the government about the fact that it has granted building permits for all sorts of public works, which the protesters say are in contradiction of its legal obligations under these various international, COP25 and so on and so forth. And against expectation, they won in the highest court. And as a consequence, I think I've got this right, I think it's either 18,000 or 80,000 projects in the Netherlands have been stopped immediately, and 60,000 building workers are now wondering where their next weekly money is coming from, and there's a huge political battle going on about that particular situation. So I suppose all that proves really is that that situations vary from country to country. But I suppose if something kind of crystallizes the idea that it's legal challenges rather than architectural agreements, which are nice to do, which may have a more crystallizing effect in the end. I think all one can say, Mario, firstly, thank you very, very much for stepping in at such short notice. Thank you for giving us such a delightful presentation. And I think it is a reminder, your point about memory, I mean, I don't know who said it, but that all buildings are memory. In a sense, the building is the memory of what the architect was thinking 3 years earlier or 14 years earlier when they began to design it. And the question of whether it's a good memory or a bad memory, and in your case, I think most definitely good, is of course because whatever other considerations, there's still this idea of beauty.
Yes.
Mario Cucinella, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.